formal state. Job admits that this happens sometimes, but it is not always true. So again, Elihu is saying that he's got to repent and turn back to God for whatever sins he's got on his soul. And Job says that's true to a point, but sometimes it doesn't explain what's really going on. Job does not speak throughout this part of the book. He doesn't seem particularly moved by Elihu's speech. But Job just doesn't want to be quarrelsome, and he lets Elihu vent for a while. Again, I'm picturing Job as like an uncle to Elihu. And he has this big old 5-chapter rant about the justice of God. And Job just lets him say his piece. I get the impression that Job's a little argued out around this point. Because again, he's already had 9 arguments defending himself. That has got to be exhausting. And after Elihu, we finally get to find God. Again, I apologize if you can't read that on the screen. What God is saying there is, "Who is this speaking in ignorance? Gird your loins like a man, and I will question you, and you will answer me." That's how God enters the discussion. A little intimidating, I bet. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the voice of God. Thomas Aquinas clarifies that there are basically 2 possibilities. The first is that the voice of God could be like that on Mount Sinai to Moses, or in some cases with Christ. So he says, God may have been very audible and impossible to ignore. It's happened before. It happens later on in the New Testament. It could happen. That's fine. But he also says that this part of Job could be metaphorical. When God is talking in the whirlwind, it's God speaking in his heart. So this part of the book might be Job having essentially a divine revelation in the quiet of his heart. And we talk about God in the whirlwind because it's such a powerful thing, even though it's interior with the other people around Job not really knowing what's going on. Because from this point on, it's just Job and God. None of the other people are speaking now. It does not even say that they heard God. So it is entirely possible that this part of the story is all in Job's head. And Thomas Aquinas says that is perfectly fine for interpretation. He also says that if the word of God was a booming voice in the sky, it would also have to have moved Job in his heart as well, because Job does take his argument to heart, as you'll see in a few minutes. So, God does not talk about Job all that much. He describes the majesty of the divine and the fact that God's ways are not our ways. Job is not even trying to argue anymore. Job knows that the truth is before his very eyes. We call him Blessed Job. He knows better than to argue against God to his face. All right, it's like arguing with a tornado. There's no point. You get out of the way and you hold on tight. But in the second half of God's response, he describes Behemoth and Leviathan as mythic beasts that are great and harmful creatures that answer to no man, but are nevertheless a part of his creation. And when God has completed his discourse, Job submits to that divine will, and he admits that he had some stirrings of pride in his heart among his genuine desire for justice and understanding. Now, I intentionally went slim on that summary. What I want you to know just for right now I'm going to come back to God's arguments a little bit later, but know that God talks about his own divine majesty and the fact that he is the creator of heaven and earth. And what most people remember from this part of the book are these 2 beasts, Behemoth and Leviathan. I'm going to talk about them in just a couple of minutes, but that's another part of Job that most people at least have a passing familiarity with. But before we circle back to that, once Job has heard out God's argument, we have the epilogue. And only for a few verses to and his holiness allows him to pray for mercy and forgiveness on behalf of his three friends, a prayer that is accepted by the Lord. So Job, even though he does not want a happy ending, he does get it. He is restored to he gets a new family twice as big, twice as much fortune, and he knows that he has God's favor, and he's able to make forgiveness and mercy for his fellow friends for their boneheaded arguments. So it all works out, even though Job did not really want that. And that is how the story ends. So again, the beginning and the end are very similar in theme, but the other 43 chapters are completely different and very human and very philosophical. And then you come to the last page, and if you're a human being, your first thought was, what does all that mean? I continue to state that it is extremely challenging to get the point of Job. It's actually the reason I did this for Job. I said at a daily mass, I said, I believe that the book of Job is the hardest book of the Old Testament to understand just by reading it on your own. And someone said, well, Father Justin, if you think that way, then help us. I said, well, I'll think about it. Here I am. So again, you get to the epilogue, and like, hey, Job got a happy ending. That's really great for him. But why? Like, what actually did God say that changed his mind? It's not clear when you just read the book. At least it wasn't to me the first 3 times. Maybe you'll have better luck. I want to go back to those mythic beasts, because they're kind of a big deal of God's argument. So God makes his argument. He refers to 2 mystical creatures, Behemoth, Leviathan. And he says these beasts are proof that the created world answers only to God, that the wild, undomesticated beasts do not answer to man in any way. Now, some people feel very uncomfortable with mythical beasts in the Bible in the first place. So there is the interpretation that Behemoth is either a hippo or an elephant, and that Leviathan is either an alligator or a whale. Sorry. There we go. Now they say these 4 possible animals, Behemoth, hippo, elephant, whale, or alligator, they're wild and fearsome animals, and they cannot be domesticated. But the problem is that's a very underwhelming solution to the problem. Because for one thing, we can understand alligators and hippos, even if we can't domesticate them. And that interpretation deflates the point that God is the only one really in control. I mean, I love that photo I found of a baby hippo. It's just kind of adorable. And where am I here? If the most awe-inspiring thing that God can create is an alligator, well then maybe man doesn't need God after all, because we can handle alligators. I mean, how many of you have eaten alligator? Okay, a couple of you. It's delicious and a little weird. But specific people in Africa, I'm not joking by the way, there are people in Africa who amuse themselves by throwing chickens near alligator dwellings. We call it chicken tossing. I didn't do it myself, by the way, but I saw it happen. There are people in Africa that are in no way terrified of alligators. There's something to taunt and make fun of. So I maintain that this argument is problematic at best, because the majesty of God is diminished. So the other way around that is cutting to the chase and realizing that these creatures are mystical beasts that have never literally existed on the face of the earth, and that is okay. I read about that in American Catholic Magazine a while back. It's the idea that these creatures represent power of nature or sin as a whole. And St. Thomas Aquinas tops that. And in that commentary, it talks about these 2 creatures as representative of the devil in general. When the book of Job talks about Leviathan, it's not so much a biological creature, but the sheer terror of the deep we are never meant to be at the bottom of the sea. It's not our home, and the earth will always be bigger than our wants and needs. And for all of that, it applies to Earth with that logic, but it's exponentially greater to the entire cosmos. Nature is bigger than us, and it always will be. Going back to Thomas Aquinas, he talks about Leviathan as the devil. No one can lead the devil where he wants. He cannot be bound, and no one really knows his motivations. My favorite thing is, he says, that like the scales on Leviathan, sinners cannot be separated from one another by any human power. The devil cannot be bribed by gold, and disturbs the world wherever he goes. He fears no one. The Leviathan is a massive evil, and is beyond any of us. I thought that was so amazing. You know, he was saying, if you have a big deep sea fish with a whole bunch of scales, you can't pry the scales off from one another. They're interlocking. And he said, that's the way sinners reinforce one another. Sin has a way of reinforcing itself. And you can't control that, Job. There is evil in the world that you can't just pick apart. It is like picking apart the scales of a giant sea creature. It cannot be done. All you have to do is wait for the sea creature to go away on its own, really. So Leviathan and Behemoth are metaphors in service to that idea. It's imagery in service to an abstract concept, and that makes the book a very good learning tool and for an advanced lesson for any generation. So, what is the ultimate point of the story? Perfectly valid question. Seriously, I still have doubts that I understand Job well enough to answer this question. I have read the book of Job, cover to cover, 3 times. I have read all of Thomas Aquinas' commentary. I've had a personal conversation with Bishop Scoville about the ending, and I still tremble at the very sight of this question. What does God's response mean? What is the real point of all of this? Bishop Scoville said to me, Justin, perhaps the real answer is that there is no real answer. Perhaps the conclusion is the real possibility that God refused to answer Job's question in any meaningful way. And Bishop Scoville went on to explain what that means. He said that at least to him, Job makes sense. The book of Job makes sense in the context of God as the ultimate power of the entire cosmos. God does not answer to human beings. And things happen in reality that don't make sense to us because it's not about us. We can't demand perfect conditions from God because we're not the only things in the universe that God cares about. All right? You could just as easily be on a boat at sea and demand perfectly still waters from God because the whales beneath you have no right to live in whatever part of the ocean you happen to visit. Can you imagine praying to God like that? Like, God, I want you to settle down the ocean because I'm taking a cruise to Europe and this isn't good enough for my needs. God, if he answered you in that whirlwind like Job, would probably say, get over yourself. The entire ocean does not exist for your convenience. So part of Bishop Scoville's interpretation also includes God saying that he has prepared a place for us. So even if the entire cosmos doesn't revolve around us, which it certainly seems that way, we are beloved by God, and we are not alone in a hostile universe. That's a fair way to look at it. We are not and yet we are nevertheless in a hostile universe. It is dangerous. It is beyond our control in more ways than we care to admit. So we really do need to trust in God, even when that hostile world lashes out and bad things happen to good people. Maybe that's the best way to summarize the book of Job. Trust in God, not because the world is fair, but because the world is unfair, and the devil is always at work. That might be the revelation that Job got. Sure. We really do need to trust in God, even when the hostile world lashes out and bad things happen to good people. Maybe that's the best way to summarize the book of Job. Trust in God, not because the world is fair, but because the world is unfair, and the devil is always at work. That's what Job had to deal with. He got evil that he did not deserve, but did not lose his faith in God. So, good questions outrank easy answers. I randomly found that while looking for Job pictures, so it's a Job-inspired quote anyway. I think that nicely sums up the book. Even if we didn't get a straight answer, pretty good question. What change does Christ make to the book? See, the book of Job is a fair and standalone book. You don't need to put Jesus on every page of the story in order to read it as a Christian. But with Christ in mind, we do have an easier time of seeing Job's side of the story, because Job is insistent that there is true reward for a good life beyond this world. Job expresses an unshakable faith in the resurrection of the dead. That might be hard for the original audience to understand, because when this was written, very few people actually believed in any sort of resurrection conviction. It was there, but it was the minority opinion. And Thomas Aquinas certainly credits Job with future visions of Christ. It's as if Job knew how faith would develop and grow in the centuries that would follow him and his turmoil. So, my response to this question is simple. What change does Christ make to the book? Well, Christ changes nothing of the story, but rather verifies the truth of the story. Christ drives this point home. Resist the devil. Know that God is in control, and goodness will not be fully rewarded here and now. He doesn't change the story. He verifies the story. Okay? Think about what happened to Christ. Christ was literally one of two people absolutely less sinful than Job, counting him and the Virgin Mary. Even less sin than Job, even more horrible things happen to a good man. Trust in God, not because the world is fair, but the world is unfair. It applies even to the Son of God. And that brings me to basically my last piece. There we go. Is this book a dusty piece of ancient literature, or is there actual value for all generations of it? You know my answer. Absolutely. You know, I look at so many faithless out there, and I always try not to judge. Really, I try. Life is complicated. But people who attack my faith hurt me. I mean, there is bile and hatred in men's hearts sometimes. You all know that. And I can hear within their words the exact same assumptions of Job's friends. If God is not going to punish us for our evil actions, then we can do whatever we want. If being a good person learning from your stupid mistakes. I hear hopelessness in one form or another. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. It's hopelessness. And that's what Job's friends were acting upon in their own way. Job had hope, faith, and love with God's promise firmly in sight. I want to wrap up on one specific example of how this ancient literature is better than a new perspective devoid of wisdom. I don't know if you know the name, but one of the big popular science people today is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's not the worst guy on the planet. Not by a long shot, actually. A lot of people like him, and that's just fine with me. I, for one, don't care much for him because of his attitude. He's the sort of physicist that goes to a sci-fi movie and then picks apart every error he can find. I remember him complaining about the fact that Star Wars: The Force Awakens doesn't make sense scientifically. I had that argument with my friend Ryan with Return of the Jedi. We were in the 6th grade. You don't need a PhD to know Star Wars is fiction. Anyway, so that's my general attitude. Again, he's not a bad guy. Not a bad guy at all. Well, one night, I was bored, and I felt like I didn't know enough about the guy. And so I started watching some YouTube clips about him, and not all of them were bad. Some of them were actually really good. I like some of what he says. I want that clear. Don't hate the guy. He has some good ideas. But there was a clip where someone, I think I hit the cord. Okay, I'm okay. Someone asked him the question, Mr. Tyson, sorry, I'm losing my place here. Does the universe have any meaning? And the YouTube clip was his answer to that question, which was no. He denied the idea that the universe has any purpose whatsoever apart from existing in the first place. And he pretends that he's a philosopher, which he's not. And he disproves, attempts to, the most common arguments for why the universe has meaning. So he says things like, the universe can't have meaning because of life, because 99.9% of all species that have existed are now extinct. He says that the universe can't have meaning because of humanity, because we're just a blip of time on the universal scale. He says that we can't have meaning because of worshiping some sort of God, because religious people aren't any better off in life than anyone else. He goes on, but those are the big arguments he makes. Now, in case it's not obvious enough to you, all those reasons are baloney. None of them actually prove his case in a philosophic sense of the word. And after I finished that YouTube clip, it was only 5 minutes or so, I sat back on my couch and I thought about what I had just listened to. And I realized Job specifically dealt with those same problems and came to a far wiser and far more reaching conclusion than Mr. Tyson did. Job understood all living things die. That does not make them worthless in the first place. Job understood that in the end, humanity is not the only thing God has created. And the whole reason Job is blessed and holy and good is because he doesn't give up his faith when things don't go his way. Job knows in his heart that all of this has meaning and purpose. It's too grand and too beautiful to fully understand, but it's there. It is there in spite of any negative development that comes along the way. Job looks at the exact same problem as Neil deGrasse Tyson. Tyson takes the easy way out. He sees a complex problem and immediately concludes that there is no solution. Are real but fleeting. And devotion to God may not always be easy.